Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei.
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday, April 2nd, a little bit before 3 p.m., and Donald Trump gave a speech, I guess.
Can we call it a speech?
Words came out of his mouth
Yeah.
in certain orders where things were kind of mixed and matched. And I recognize the individual words, but
Like there was
strung
a lot
together
of
that way, it was just...
he went back and forth between so many topics at the same time. It was 19-minute speech, am I right? He mentioned nuclear a lot and he mentioned great a lot. And I think the bottom line was the war continues.
Pretty much. So, okay, because this war is a month old now and everything kind of just sort of bleeds into each other, I think the first thing we need to do is really differentiate what happened this week so that we don't confuse things with things that happened before,
I
right?
just mentioned before recording that I'm losing track of what happened this week.
It's not that difficult to lose track of. Everything just bleeds, like I said. But okay, so for this particular week, there was no real significant kinetic action like we saw in the opening days of the war. And that's because this week started out with that temporary truce that Donald Trump said that he was going to honor, saying that, they were still in talks. Because we have to remember last week, Donald Trump said that he was going to bomb every single power plant in Iran, starting with the biggest one. But after he said that, he kind of walked it back and said because of negotiations, there will be no new strikes. Not to say that there were no strikes. The Iranians were quite busy lobbing missiles. But whatever. When we come back to today's speech, there were several contradictory ideas, which is, again, not new, considering that we're talking about Donald Trump. At one point, he said that Iran was completely decimated and obliterated. I believe these are the two specific words that he used. And then he said that he was going to spend about 2 or 3 more weeks to destroy more of Iran, even
That
though it
number
was
is probably
already
out of his.
decimated.
That number is probably very random though. 2 or 3 weeks.
We don't know why he wants to stay for 2 or 3 more weeks if, Iran was already decimated and obliterated. But the thing that Donald Trump said was that he wants to take Iran back to the Stone Age. Keep in mind that before this war started, Donald Trump was telling the Iranian people, yes, keep protesting against your government and reclaim your freedom. Fast forward a few weeks, I'm going to turn your country into the Stone Age. I don't know if that's going to win hearts and minds in people in Iran.
Yeah, and also I'm starting to get confused about the Iranians' stance about all this because like over the weekend there was discussion that the Iran side gave 5-point negotiation or deal to the US side. And so when we were looking at the initial news about how Donald Trump is going to do the speech to the nation, I thought he will mention something like that, but it wasn't in there at all.
I'm convinced that there is no direct negotiations going on right now. They're not even emailing each other at this point. They are going through intermediaries. That intermediary is likely Pakistan at this point. But because they're going through intermediaries, God knows who's saying what to each other and what's getting lost in translation. Trump is saying that the negotiations are going, and and Iran's saying we're not talking, and that's clearly a great sign. But basically, it's not just today's speech, though. This entire past week, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, and Pete Hegseth, they've all been saying the same thing. They are going to end this war quickly, and everyone else who relies on the Strait of Hormuz, they should, I believe this is the exact phrase that he used in today's speech, go and take the oil and cherish the strait.
Cherish the strait.
Whatever that means. Because,
Cherish the
trying
strait.
to understand what's going through Donald Trump's mind is like trying to understand what the feelings of an insane rabbit raccoon is. It's just not humanly possible.
That's true. That's a soundbite right there. I'll go to Junha for a second about the Easter remark,
Right.
Easter event remark, and
Mm.
then I'll come back to you, John, about what you wrote earlier before the speech. Junha, what was the reported remarks by Trump? It seemed like South Korea was specifically singled out.
Yeah, so they were, but he does seem to have an overriding confusion with the number count of US soldiers on the peninsula. He keeps on mentioning that we have 45,000 US troops on the peninsula when actually it is somewhere around 28,500. So we have that on the patrol. He said that we, I quote, we only have 45,000 soldiers in harm's way over there right next to a nuclear force, which is directly referring to
To
North
North
Korea.
Korea.
He's saying that South Korea was not helpful to
What
Washington's
was his
efforts.
actual wording? Was it like not helpful?
Yes, he said not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And then after singling out South Korea, he mentioned like Japan and China.
Japan and China is saying that basically, as John mentioned, the country should go and help themselves.
But Japan and China
Mhm.
again. Okay, that's interesting. What's your take on this?
Keep in mind that
Was he
for
thinking through?
keep in mind that for
Does he ever?
years, the United States has been telling anyone who would bother to listen that the Chinese Navy is expanding its reach and capabilities, and that if they do this, this would be harmful to the U.S.-led order and the maritime order, and that they should try to mitigate or minimize the extent of the Chinese naval capacity.
That's a good point.
But here's the US president now telling China, bring your battleships, because, like, as though they will not, because they don't want to get entangled in Middle Eastern affairs. But he's saying, China, please send your battleships. Where?
And going back to Korea, you wrote a pretty risky article right before the speech, basically predicting what he's gonna say,
Was it
Trump is
really
gonna say.
risky?
It's still like editorially risky, but it wasn't risky at the end. So what was your point, and what's the implication for South Korea in the next week?
Weeks, months, years, who really knows? Uh,
Great
okay,
analysis.
let's take a look at what Donald Trump said and assume for a moment that he actually means it this time and will
Mm.
actually follow through. 2 or 3 more weeks of intense bombing of Iranian targets if there's no deal reached, whatever that means. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, exactly on the dot, all US troops in the Persian Gulf that are part of Operation Epic Fury go back home. Now, then we have to talk about what's going to be left because despite the constant aerial bombardments that we've seen over the past 5 weeks, the Iranians they're still in charge. The IRGC is still in charge. Now they are likely very diminished compared to 5 weeks ago. They probably don't have the same assets. A lot of the former leaders, at least the ones that everyone knew about, are probably gone. But the remnants of that regime is still left. And what they're going to want is that they're going to want to hold on to power as much as possible. And in order to do that, they need money. And how are they going to get money? They will have control of the Strait of Hormuz, this body of water that 70% of the world's global energy trade has to pass through. And they're going to set up a toll booth. Already there are reports that not every ship, some ships have been allowed to travel through the straits completely unharmed and unmolested. But apparently, this number that I keep seeing online is $2 million. Anytime an oil tanker passes through the Strait of Hormuz and is part of a non-hostile country, but they still want to manifest and everything else, they're saying, "Give us $2 million." So that's immediately one. Let's bring this back to South Korea. If South Korean ships that have to travel through the Strait of Hormuz have to give the manifest destination, the information about their cargo and everything, that's a complete loss of maritime sovereignty, for one thing. And if South Korean vessels have to pay that $2 million fine or whatever that figure is every time they pass the Strait of Hormuz, that's extortion as well. And so for 70, 80 years, what we had was that the United States, using its military power, was able to police the global commons, and that's gone. There is no global commons anymore. Now we're going to see every single major power in every single region that has the ability to project that power try to take whatever control they can. And so open navigation was nice while it lasted.
Did it actually? Was it really that great? The, ent-
Yeah,
the
it was
entire
actually great.
structure.
The, Yeah, as long as you're working within the system, it was great.
Yeah. Well, let's move like even more like ground level sort of observation. Last night, some of our own staffers, including myself, slightly freaked out looking at the flight tickets.
Oh yeah.
Prices going up for like many of the tickets that our team like sort of wanted to get for vacation, like it was already like all up apparently. The things that are hit most severely were some of the tickets that are going from Asia to Europe, but it's like extreme cases are being reported. But John, you try to explain to us that there are differences between immediate impact with bonds and stocks
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
the secondary impact. Can you explain to the listeners who might be wondering, should I get my tickets right now,
Whenever
etc.?
we see a major event that's happening in the world, whether it's the president of the United States declaring war or a couple of planes hitting a World Trade Center or whatever it is, anytime something major like that happens, immediately markets get spooked. Now, what does that phrase exactly mean? People get scared that whatever money that they invested in whatever portfolio or stock or whatever will start tanking, and they want to pull their money out while they still have it so that they can either, you know, put it behind safer assets or perhaps even literally keep it under the mattress. Whatever it is, that's the immediate things that we see. So, what are the first immediate things that we see? Immediately, what we'll see are things like what's happening to stocks, what's happening to equities, what's happening to bonds, what's happening to treasuries. These are the immediate things that people start to get worried about. At the same time, people are also worried about commodities. Now, what do we mean by commodities? We mean things like what's the price of gold? What's the price of a barrel of oil? What's the price of bushels of wheat? The things that people actually need. And so immediately we see the stock markets and we see bonds and commodities immediately impacted.
Hmm.
Now, these are the first things that get impacted,
Which did this morning.
which got impacted since day one. But once they get impacted, this impact doesn't just stay in those markets. They flow. They flow downstream. And when they flow downstream, what does that mean? So let's say that commodities, take commodities for example, oil prices go up, freight prices, jet fuel prices, the fuel that you put in your car, all of that goes up as well. And so this is what we call secondary impacts. The primary impact already happened. That translates to secondary
What are the
impacts.
prime examples that people can like understand and see in real life every day?
Like what you just pointed out with the airline tickets, that's exactly what happened. Energy prices went up first immediately on the very get go, and then the war started to drag on, and we're not sure what the US goal and objective is. And so the airlines are saying, okay, we need to think about how much fuel do we have right now? How much fuel can we reliably get going forward? How much raw oil are we getting that we can refine into jet fuel? And what's the bottleneck? And once they take all of that into consideration and they think, oh no, we do not know if we have enough fuel to last us for another next 3 months, then supply and demand start to come into effect, doesn't it? And so that's why we're seeing these prices go up by 500% in some cases.
That's because airlines are, changing the number of available flights,
They
right?
have to change the number of available flights. They have to make sure that they are operating at optimal levels. And so, yeah, if you want to visit Paris sometime soon, may I recommend that you take a look at a picture of the Eiffel Tower instead?
Buy a baguette from the
Is it?
local
Is
Paris
it?
croissant.
Okay, let's move to domestic politics and budget-related issues. 시정연, sir, what is it, and what did Lee Jae-myung say, and what was the response from the
It's
parties?
essentially a follow on from what we saw earlier in the week through the cabinet meeting on Tuesday, where the government passed the draft budget or the supplementary wartime budget, they called, of $17 billion. That's for cash transfers to lower income households, expanded fuel tax cuts, and continued price controls on petroleum products, as well as advancing support for vulnerable businesses. Basically, what Lee Jae-myung was saying at Parliament today or National Assembly, he was requesting that lawmakers help pass the draft budget since it does need to pass Parliament before it can be actually enacted. He was saying that this is not just just rainy showers, but it's a passing storm. It's going to affect the entire country, and he asked for collective support from both sides of the political aisle in making sure that the government can play its role and supporting the public so that the wartime effect from the Iran conflict does not prolong.
So he did another voucher sort of idea, right? But this time around, this one actually got like a little bit of like boost in approval rating in some of the usually conservative segments of the society.
Sure, yeah.
And he did a voucher. He included the voucher program into the budget speech and the announcement. And it looks like, unlike the last time he did the voucher thing, he changed the eligibility for to apply for it basically.
So the last time the voucher came into action was in July, just 1 month after he took office last year. And he received a little bit of criticism from the general public, considering that these vouchers were going to anyone and everyone. However, the vouchers that are coming out now, I think it's to everyone. I think 70% of the population, barring the 30% that are within the 상위권, the sort of top tier in the economic income sort of level. And there is criteria that the government has placed so that the vouchers can be distributed properly.
Hmm. What was the response from the People Power Party, the conservative
Well,
opposition?
he just finished the speech a couple minutes ago, so I'm sure the PPP is trying to pick their words from their vocab range to come up with a response. But before the speech actually started, the PPP floor leader Song Won-seok, he came out and said that the president should refrain from using language that's sensationalist and try to calm the public instead of using phrases like wartime supplementary budget, which the president has repeatedly used in cabinet meetings. Of course, there was not really any constructive criticism coming from the PPP regarding the president's speech or what was expected of it, and just criticism based on the language used.
Right, but I wouldn't completely disagree with the point. Like not on the wartime part, but like overall, I've been monitoring the president's social media recently. Maybe this is a separate issue from the speech itself, but he has been using a lot of, not cautiously worded language on social media from time to time, not just on policy issues, but basically like responding to like other Twitter users as well. So it's something to keep an eye on. His language is definitely a bit more freewheeling than when he inaugurated. And he was going after what he called fake news a lot
Right.
this week
Hmm.
as well. And he was specifically pinpointing to certain outlets and certain sentences and saying that, this is like malicious and blah, 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 blah. And, that's something to be actually mindful of.
Well, I mean, I think the most telling example came, which was, we understand the premise of where the president came after when he was accusing the SBS producer
Oh,
for
yeah, that
the,
one.
I think it was 그것이 알고 싶다. I don't know the Korean.
Gangster thing?
It was, yeah. So it was basically like a documentary that classed Lee Jae-myung as having relations to a gangster or
Mm,
alleged relations with a gangster. It came up in a
it's
court
very brave
review.
of them.
Yeah, it came up with a court review as being false,
Yeah.
and as immediately after that it was deemed as a false accusation by the court. Lee Jae-myung publicly stated on Twitter that he wants an apology and a trackback
Yeah.
from the SBS producer, which he got eventually, but still kept on flagging as a bit of sort of undue apology from them.
Yeah, right. Just generally, like, I get his point, but being a head of state, being a president, I feel like the weight of each word that he sort of posts on social media is a bit different. So that's something to keep an eye on if he just continues doing that going forward. Week ahead.
President Emmanuel Macron of France, he'll be visiting, well, he's flying in today, and then he'll have a summit with Lee Jae-myung tomorrow. They're set to discuss defense, economic issues related to the Strait of Hormuz. You also got the April 3rd incident, the ceremony that will commemorate that tomorrow, where the prime minister is expected to deliver a speech.
And the Macron summit, it's back to back right after the Indonesian president visited South Korea as well. And the bilateral relations sort of expanded
Hmm.
into a higher tier sort of diplomatic relations.
Maybe Macron can also give us a picture of the Eiffel Tower, since I can't
Maybe.
visit Paris
And a
anymore.
shade.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Mm. And also, NATO Secretary General will be visiting the White House. It's not directly related to South Korea, but considering what Trump has been saying on NATO, can you just briefly explain what Trump said about NATO, basically?
Well, it's the same thing that he's been saying for years, right? NATO's useless, is a paper tiger. We help them, they don't help us. And so I'm thinking of quitting NATO. Well, he just cannot quit NATO completely. There are other things he can do, but the law says that in order for the United States to withdraw from NATO, it needs to have a two-third approval from the Senate. Good luck getting that. But of course, there are other things that he can do, like let's say not honor the fifth article. Article 5 of the NATO Charter, or say not really fund any sorts of new joint military programs or whatever it is. There are other things that it can do. And so, although there's no real fear that the United States will formally withdraw from NATO, there is a fear that NATO will be degraded. And so the NATO Secretary General is saying, please, sir, don't take our money away.
I
Kind of
don't think
meaning
he's gonna say like that, but still, it's something to keep an eye
it'll
on.
basically come down to it. And all of this information will be sent to email inboxes by Monday at 2 p.m. via the Week Ahead newsletter. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.